The Peruvian Public Prosecutor's Office requested 18 months of preventive imprisonment for the former head of state, Pedro Castillo. Also, Cuba hosts the 22nd Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America and People's Trade Treaty ALBA-TCP. And the European Parliament dismissed Greek socialist Eva Kaili as vice president of the chamber for her alleged involvement in the corruption scheme. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Now we begin with the news. The Peruvian Public Prosecutor's Office requested on Wednesday 18 months of preventive imprisonment for the former head of state, Pedro Castillo. The information was provided by a source close to the investigation against the former president for the alleged crime of rebellion. This request of the prosecutor's office sets legal procedures for Pedro Castillo to remain in prison after the initial time of preventive detention concluded on Wednesday. Meanwhile, Supreme Court Judge Juan Carlos Checkley postponed the preventive detention hearing of former President Pedro Castillo and the former Premier Aníbal Torres until December 15th. Given the situation, Peru experiences its fifth consecutive day of protests amid repressive police action. Demonstrations demand the closure of Congress and the call for a constitute assembly. The Ombudsman's office officially stated that there are 7 deaths, pointing out that among the victims there are 2 minors, while local media reported that the number of deaths could be as high as 8. At the same time, agrarian unions and farmers joined by indigenous organizations began a national strike to demand the closing of the legislature and the calling of a constitute process. Meanwhile, rallies in the Peruvian department of Arequipa continue, demanding the release of Pedro Castillo and for a new constitute assembly. The Ministry of Defense announced on Tuesday a state of emergency in the region for 30 days, arguing the need to protect public and private property. At the same time, the region's merchants have joined the demonstrations and marched in Arequipa's main square. At least 100 citizens took over by force the installations of the Cumani gas compressor plant in the province of La Convención. The company also informed through a communiqué about the implementation of a contingency plan as a preventive measure in the face of the situation. The incident comes amidst the social pressure exerted by Peruvian citizens in response to the actions of the Congress and Dina Boluarte's government. Now we move on to other topics. Ecuadorian authorities concluded the first prison census with valuable information on the number of people deprived of their liberty and overcrowding rate. The census was carried out after the prison massacres that left near 400 prisoners dead since February 2021. According to the country's National Service for the Comprehensive Care of Adults Deprived of Their Liberty and Adolescent Offenders, the overpopulation reached 39,000 prisoners in 2021. However, after the violent clashes, the government granted pardons and benefits to decongest the prisons. With a capacity for 30,000 people, Ecuadorian prisons have become the scene of violent confrontations between criminal gangs linked to drug trafficking. At least 60,000 people in El Salvador have been detained during the last months under the emergency regime imposed by the Bukele government to deal with alleged gang members, a plan questioned by various organizations that have denounced human rights violations. Local authorities reported that more than 400 alleged gang members were among those detained after the army surrounded the city of Soyapango on December the 3rd. The actions are taking place in the context of the entry into force of the regime of exception, which since last March allows security forces to carry out arrests without warrants, among other irregularities. Social movements have denounced the use of the security policy as a pretext to arbitrarily detain citizens and political opposition leaders, despite the government's assurance that people's rights are being respected. Human rights organizations in Argentina held a press conference demanding respect for the rule of law in the country and expressed their support for Vice President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. The conference was held at the Museum Sitio de Memoria, formerly known as the Higher School of Mechanics of the Navy, which served as a torture and detention site during the 1976 to 1983 military dictatorship in Argentina. Secretary of Human Rights Horacio Pietragaya Corti, as well as the mothers of Plaza de Mayo and other institutions, attended the meeting. During the event, activists denounced the politicization of justice, as well as the violation of rights in the nation. Given this situation, they advocated for popular mobilization to reverse this reality. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. This Wednesday began the 22nd Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America People's Trade Treaty in Havana, Cuba. The meeting aimed to commemorate the 18th anniversary of the creation of ALBA-TCP as a platform dedicated to the integration of Latin American and Caribbean countries, focusing on solidarity, complementarity, justice, and cooperation. Over the years, ALBA-TCP has had the fundamental historical purpose of uniting the capabilities and strengths of its member countries to achieve structural transformations and relations necessary to accomplish an integral development. The alliances is made up of 10 member countries: Venezuela, Bolivia, Nicaragua, Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, Grenada, and Cuba. As one of the presidents participating in the 22nd Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America People's Trade Treaty, celebrated in the Cuban capital, Bolivian head of state Luis Arce Catacora expressed his delight to meet with his Cuban counterpart Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez. Both leaders stated their willingness to remain firm on the path of progress and on the democratic and cultural revolution. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan president, Nicolás Maduro Moros, stated that in ALBA-TCP there is hope for the people in the face of domination and injustice. The Venezuelan head of state also said the alliance is the common home of Latin American and Caribbean countries, where they can embrace each other equality as brothers to create, dream, and work for a more just world. Lastly, Maduro ratified his country's commitment to the path of union, respect, and inclusion. And the president of the host country, Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez, also shared his statements on the 22nd Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America. The president remembered the words of the commander of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro Ruz, in which he expressed his desire to call the great United America as homeland, and celebrated the 18th anniversary of the ALBA-TCP as an integrationist dream of Fidel and Commander Hugo Chavez. Diaz-Canel welcomed as well his Latin American and Caribbean counterparts, pointing out that cooperation and solidarity are the path to be followed. Now we address other topics. On Wednesday, at least 4 migrants died when a small boat heading for British shores from France capsized in the freezing waters of the English Channel. Lifeboats, helicopters, and rescue teams working together with the French and British navies responded to the incident. Immigration to Britain, organized by human smuggling gangs, has become a priority issue for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's government. Local media reported that 43 people have been rescued. Despite the freezing temperatures, more than 500 migrants have made the dangerous journey in small boats since the weekend alone. More than 40,000 have arrived from France this year to Britain seeking for asylum. And the Federal Statistics Office in Germany reported annual inflation rate dropped slightly to 10.0% in November from 10.4% in October. This is the third straight month of double-digit annual inflation in the country. Despite the slight drop in benchmark inflation, energy and food prices were still 38.7% and 21.1% respectively higher in November than they were in the same month last year. Federal statistics also confirmed that the Harmonized Index of Consumer Prices, an indicator of inflation and price stability from the European Central Bank, increased by 11.3% year-on-year in November. In Brussels, energy ministers from the European Union remained divided over a gas price cap after more than 10 hours of talks on intervention in the natural gas market. The European Union has been struggling for months over key issues such as whether to cap gas prices, how to do it, and by how much. Following the e-energy ministers meeting on November 24th, the ministers met again in an attempt to reach a consensus on these issues before the Bloc Summit scheduled for this week. After the meeting, German Minister for the Economic Affairs and Climate Action, Robert Habeck, said that the event failed to resolve all the issues as the parties were still unable to reach an accord. Now we address other topics. On Tuesday, 1 person died, dozens were injured, and 2 were missing after tornadoes tore through swaths of several south-central U.S. states. According to Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office in Louisiana, a young boy was found dead after a tornado touched down south of Shreveport City. About 20 people were injured in Farmerville, Louisiana, with multiple reports of damages on Tuesday night. In northern Texas, Grapevine, a tornado injured 5 people and damaged businesses. Another 2 people were wounded in Texas' Wise County, as reported by the County Emergency Management Office. On Tuesday afternoon, 5 tornadoes were confirmed across northern Texas, and a dozen may have occurred, according to the National Weather Service. They were part of a massive winter storm system pummeling the Rockies and the northern Plains states, with more than 10 million people under winter weather warnings or advisories. The severe weather threat will continue into Wednesday and Thursday as the southern states is bracing for heavy rains and northern states face blizzard conditions, impeding travel and threatening power outages, according to the Weather Service. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan arrived at Turkmenbashi International Airport in Turkmenistan to participate in the Summit of Heads of State of Turkey, Azerbaijan and the host country. The President of Turkmenistan, Sidar Bendermevov, and the President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, will also attend the summit. The heads of state will discuss strategic issues related to energy and regional security. In addition, bilateral meetings will take place during the day. Earlier this week, the President of Turkey received Vyacheslav Volodin, the chairman of the State Duma of the Federal Parliament of Russia, to discuss the fight against terrorism and inter-regional cooperation. At a regular press briefing, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said that the wishes of African countries and people to choose cooperation partners should be respected, as they are in the best position to say what is good for them.
Supporting the development of Africa is the common responsibility of the international community. We are always happy to see diversity of Africa's cooperation partnerships and welcome the international community, including the United States, to pay more attention and invest more in Africa and carry out truly equal and mutually beneficial cooperation with Africa. At the same time, we hope that the U.S. can view China-Africa cooperation with an open mind. Africa is not an arena for big power games, still less the target of wanton pressure from any country or certain person. African countries and people have the wisdom and ability to choose cooperation partners that serve their own interests. African countries and people are in the best position to say who is truly good for Africa.
And speaking on behalf of China's foreign ministry, the spokesperson Wang Wenbin urged Japan to reverse its plans for discharging the nuclear-contaminated wastewater from the earthquake-damaged Fukushima nuclear plant into the sea and to seek other ways to dispose of it.
Supporting the development of Africa is the common responsibility of the international community. We are always happy to see diversity of Africa's cooperation partnerships and welcome the international community, including the United States, to pay more attention and invest more in Africa and carry out truly equal and mutually beneficial cooperation with Africa. At the same time, we hope that the U.S. can view China-Africa cooperation with an open mind. Africa is not an arena for big power games, still less the target of wanton pressure from any country or certain person. African countries and people have the wisdom and ability to choose cooperation partners that serve their own interests. African countries and people are in the best position to say who is truly good for Africa.
And just as the hearts of millions of fans live the emotions of the Qatar 2022 World Cup, TeleSUR joins this sporting event with From the Field, a show that brings news, analysis, reviews, and more to our audience. Don't miss it. Our show airs 1 p.m. local time in Caracas and 12 p.m. New York. Remember, From the Field, only on TeleSUR. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.